Washington, D.C. was still recovering from a series of tremors in the political landscape when Kash Patel, the hard-nosed director of the FBI, strode into the bureau's press room with a black folder in his hand and fire in his eyes. For weeks, rumors had been swirling. Something big was coming, but no one knew how big. Patel was known for his calm, calculated demeanor. But that day he didn't mince words. "This is not about politics," he said, looking directly into the camera. "This is about corruption, conspiracy, and a decades-long abuse of power." The room fell into stunned silence. Even the most seasoned journalists could sense that this wasn't just another DC stunt or partisan press conference. This was something different, seismic. The folder he held contained documents that were about to ignite a political firestorm unlike anything in recent memory. Patel continued, "Our investigation, spanning over 18 months, has uncovered a network of covert operations, financial misdealings, and federal abuses connected to one name, Hillary Clinton." Gasps rippled through the room. The so-called Clinton Cartel, a term long whispered among the most skeptical political observers, was now being spoken aloud by the director of the FBI, and not as speculation but as a fact backed by evidence. Kash Patel then laid out the bombshell. An internal FBI task force, codenamed Operation Liberty Bell, had been quietly probing into activities related to the Clinton Foundation, foreign donations, and backdoor arrangements made during Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. What they found wasn't just smoke. It was a raging wildfire of deceit. Emails, bank transactions, whistleblower testimony, and encrypted communications painted a picture of an operation that used political influence to build a global network of wealth and protection. From Uranium One to shady deals in Haiti, the task force's findings suggested that Clinton's inner circle was involved in a pay-to-play scheme of staggering proportions. And then came the kicker. "We have secured indictments," Patel stated flatly, to audible gasps. "Multiple members of the Clinton inner circle have been subpoenaed. Arrests are forthcoming." The name Clinton had long carried untouchable weight in American politics. To many, the idea of legal accountability was a fantasy. But here stood Kash Patel, not on a blog or fringe media outlet, but in front of the nation, backed by hard evidence, daring to challenge one of the most powerful political dynasties in history. The country exploded. Cable news went wall to wall. Twitter melted down. Protests erupted in cities, some in support of Clinton, others demanding justice. America was split down the middle, and the tremors were just beginning. But behind closed doors, Hillary Clinton herself was far from calm. In her secluded Chappaqua mansion, she watched Patel's press conference in stunned silence. For the first time in her career, the shield of political power didn't feel so invincible. Her advisors scrambled. Phones rang off the hook. Long-forgotten favors were being called in. Damage control wasn't just a strategy anymore, it was a lifeline. But Kash Patel wasn't done. He'd been underestimated before, treated as just another political appointee. But what no one knew was that Patel had built Operation Liberty Bell in complete secrecy, bypassing the usual leaks and career bureaucrats who might have sabotaged it from within. And now, the trap had been sprung. 3 days after Kash Patel's historic press conference, the first domino fell. At 6:12 a.m. in a quiet Georgetown neighborhood, FBI tactical units arrested John Reynes, a former top Clinton strategist and longtime fixer. Reynes had worked behind the scenes on everything from campaign narratives to sensitive foreign connections, and the FBI had tracked encrypted messages that showed he was attempting to flee the country. At the same time in Manhattan, another team swept in on Cheryl Mills, Clinton's former chief of staff. Though she had always played the quiet, measured aide, the files recovered by Operation Liberty Bell revealed a very different story, one where Mills orchestrated the deletion of key emails and coordinated offshore transactions with foreign donors, including those from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and even China. The news sent shockwaves across the nation. Cable news anchors stuttered through live broadcasts. Politicians ducked for cover. And Clinton herself? She lawyered up fast. But what came next was even more damning. Patel and his team unveiled a leaked deposition from a former Clinton Foundation employee, an anonymous insider who'd been working undercover with the FBI for nearly a year. Referred to only as Witness C, his testimony revealed the internal structure of what he described as a donor paywall. In his exact words, You don't get a seat at the Clinton table unless you bring a check. And not just for the campaign, for the foundation, the speech circuit, the overseas consulting projects. It was always about money and influence. The FBI released partial transcripts, meticulously redacted to protect identities, but enough to let the public know this wasn't just theoretical. This was criminal. Meanwhile, Patel made another bold move. He authorized the release of surveillance footage from 2015 showing a private meeting between Hillary Clinton and a Ukrainian energy magnate just days before a massive donation to the Clinton Foundation had been processed. The man's name had been scrubbed from official records, but facial recognition technology confirmed his identity. And now that footage was public. For years, stories like these were dismissed as conspiracies. But Patel had turned speculation into evidence. The Department of Justice, under pressure from both sides of the aisle, had no choice but to open formal proceedings. A federal grand jury was impaneled. And behind the scenes, at least 6 sealed indictments were filed related to financial fraud, obstruction of justice, and violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. America was glued to its screens. The Clinton loyalists were panicking. Longtime associates like Huma Abedin and even Bill Clinton's former aides were reportedly lawyering up, fearing they might be dragged into the legal inferno. Meanwhile, whistleblowers began coming forward. Patel's press conference had broken the dam. Former low-level staffers, accountants, IT techs, people who had once stayed silent out of fear were now volunteering to talk, submitting sworn affidavits to the FBI. The Clinton cartel wasn't just cracking. It was collapsing. For Hillary, the once untouchable queen of American politics, the walls were closing in. Her legal team fired off statements calling it a politically motivated witch hunt, but the evidence wasn't just paper trails, it was digital fingerprints, signed memos, and secret recordings. Kash Patel stood calm in the middle of the storm. He had anticipated every move, every spin, every accusation. And he wasn't flinching. "We are not targeting politics," he said in a follow-up interview. "We are targeting corruption. And no one, regardless of name or power, is above the law." Even his harshest critics were being forced to admit it. This wasn't bluster. This was real. And for the first time in decades, the Clinton dynasty was teetering on the edge of ruin. Cornered but far from defeated, Hillary Clinton launched a furious counteroffensive. Within 48 hours of the arrests and leaks, a group of powerful Washington insiders gathered in an undisclosed townhouse in DuPont Circle. The Clinton network was activating every surviving contact, every thread of influence they had left. From media executives to former intelligence operatives, the inner circle plotted how to fight back against the seemingly unstoppable Kash Patel. And at the heart of their strategy? Discredit Patel. If they couldn't hide the evidence, they'd go after the man behind it. Suddenly, hit pieces began flooding major media networks. Anonymous sources accused Patel of having political motivations, backroom connections, even fabricated relationships with foreign governments. Talk shows ran segments questioning the legality of Operation Liberty Bell and speculating about whether Patel had overstepped his authority. But it wasn't working. Americans, especially the silent majority watching from flyover country, had seen this movie before. The tactics, the smear jobs, the carefully timed leaks, the narrative control. But this time, something felt different. Because Patel wasn't playing by Washington's rules. In an unexpected move, Kash went on live television, not through a pre-recorded press conference, but on a primetime national interview with one of the country's biggest evening anchors. For 45 uninterrupted minutes, he laid everything bare. "This isn't about politics," he said again and again. "This is about Americans who want their government back. We followed the law. We followed the money. And it led us right to the people who've been untouchable for far too long." Then he dropped another bombshell. He revealed that during the Clinton email investigation years prior, key pieces of evidence had been intentionally buried by senior officials inside the DOJ and intelligence community. Patel's team had recovered internal memos proving that requests for search warrants, digital recovery tools, and access to offshore accounts were deliberately denied. That was the match. The backlash against the Clinton camp and the system that protected them was immediate. Social media exploded with hashtags like #Clinton Cartel and #No One Above the Law. Protesters lined the streets outside Clinton Foundation offices in New York, demanding transparency. But the biggest shock came from overseas. Foreign governments, now facing exposure due to leaked Clinton communications, began scrambling. Officials in Ukraine, Qatar, and even Germany launched internal probes into unusual transactions linked to US-based donations. Former diplomats were being hauled in for questioning. It was no longer just a domestic issue. It was international. And yet, through it all, Hillary Clinton stayed uncharacteristically quiet. Her legal team issued statements. Her spokespersons appeared on sympathetic networks. But Hillary herself? Silent, unseen. She hadn't made a single public appearance since Patel's announcement. Behind the scenes, however, she was raging. She's not going down alone. One insider told a reporter on Background. If they try to take her out, she'll take half of DC with her. That's when rumors began to swirl. Clinton had dirt, real dirt, on former presidents, senators, CEOs, ties to Epstein, ties to foreign agents. If she went down, she could blow up the entire establishment. But Patel wasn't flinching. He had anticipated this too. In fact, part of Operation Liberty Bell included insurance files from protected whistleblowers and digital vaults stored in secure federal servers. If anything happened to him or his team, everything would be released to the public. Emails, photos, audio. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was war. And for the first time, the Clinton empire was on defense as the dust settled from Patel's televised bombshell. Something eerie swept across Washington. Old names began to disappear from public life. Former intelligence chiefs stopped appearing on Sunday shows. Lobbyists canceled meetings. Clinton Foundation board members quietly resigned. It wasn't just fear, it was self-preservation. Everyone was wondering, who's next? Kash Patel knew this phase would be the most dangerous. Not because of a legal obstacle, but because the Clinton Cartel wasn't just a group of individuals. It was an infrastructure, one that extended into media, Silicon Valley, foreign policy think tanks, and even the intelligence community. And that's when it happened. A classified leak clearly orchestrated accused Patel himself of mishandling sensitive data during Operation Liberty Bell. The story broke on 3 major networks simultaneously, clearly coordinated. The smear was intended to discredit him and trigger internal investigations. His security clearance was temporarily suspended and whispers of a special counsel swirled in the shadows of the DOJ. But Patel had seen it coming. Before going public with any evidence, he documented every step, every signed warrant, every approval, every chain of custody. He wasn't just clean, he was airtight. And more than that, he had a backup plan. Within hours of the smear campaign, a federal judge unsealed one of the Operation Liberty Bell indictments, a massive financial conspiracy case involving offshore money laundering and foreign lobbying violations. The lead name on the indictment? Huma Abedin, Clinton's longtime aide, personal confidant, and the silent bridge between the Clinton machine and foreign donors. The evidence was overwhelming. Wire transfers, falsified tax filings, even communications suggesting Abedin acted as an unregistered foreign agent during her time at the State Department. The case connected her directly to a Saudi intelligence operative posing as a diplomat. Kash Patel's legal chess match was in full swing. And Clinton? She was trapped. The arrest of Huma Abedin shook her to the core. It was more than just a legal threat. It was personal. Abedin had been like family, and now she faced decades in prison. Worse, there were whispers she was already cooperating to reduce her sentence. Behind closed doors, the Clinton legal team scrambled to cut deals, delay proceedings, and pressure old allies for favors. But the tide had turned. Even deep state operatives who once protected the Clintons like clockwork were going radio silent. Kash had made it too risky. And then came the emergency hearing. Clinton's lawyers filed a motion to suppress key evidence, citing national security concerns. But Patel's team responded with a rare legal maneuver, a classified closed-door evidentiary hearing overseen by a military tribunal-level federal judge with clearance to access all documents. What came out of that hearing remains under lock and key, but it was enough for the judge to issue the following ruling. The motion to suppress is denied. The evidence stands. Discovery will proceed as scheduled. That one sentence sent shockwaves through the political elite. Clinton was finished. And she knew it. The very next day, Hillary Clinton released a carefully worded video on her social media account. Pale, visibly shaken, and void of her usual confidence, she stared into the camera and said, "There's a lot I could say. There's a lot I want to say. But I've been in public life long enough to know when things have changed. I will cooperate fully with any lawful inquiry. And I ask only that the truth be treated with care. No press conference. No media spin. No blaming a vast right-wing conspiracy. Just surrender. And while her supporters clung to narratives of victimhood, even they sensed the end. There would be no redemption arc. Number 2028 Presidential Comeback. The Clinton Cartel was collapsing and Kash Patel had pulled the thread that unraveled it all. Courtroom cameras weren't allowed during the opening of United States versus Hillary Rodham Clinton. But it didn't matter. By the time the trial began, the entire world was already watching. Kash Patel stood at the center of it all. Once a behind-the-scenes warrior in America's intelligence circles, he had now become a national figure, both feared and revered. Memes spread across social media like wildfire. Patel, flanked by stacks of legal folders labeled truth bombs, marching through the swamp in full armor. The charges against Clinton were no longer just about email servers or political donations. Through Patel's exhaustive work, the DOJ had brought forward a sweeping RICO case, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, usually reserved for organized crime. The Clinton Foundation was no longer being treated as a charity. It was a front. The prosecution laid it out with ruthless precision. $184 million traced from foreign governments and shell corporations into foundation accounts, only to be siphoned into private trusts. Evidence of pay-to-play operations while Clinton served as Secretary of State, approvals of defense contracts and arms deals in exchange for donations. Suppressed reports and manipulated intelligence assessments that benefited Clinton-linked companies in conflict zones. And then came the most devastating witness of all, Huma Abedin. In a plea deal, Abedin testified under oath that she had routinely funneled sensitive information to international associates at Hillary's direction under the guise of diplomatic outreach. She described encrypted communications, encrypted cash cards, and backdoor meetings in foreign embassies. The courtroom was dead silent when Abedin, voice trembling, said, "We weren't just playing politics. We were building a system. A shadow system. And Hillary was at the center of it." But perhaps the most stunning moment came when Patel presented a never-before-seen internal Clinton Foundation document, a black ledger maintained by a former finance officer who had turned whistleblower. This ledger, authenticated by forensic experts, contained secret code names for donors and recipients, back-channel payments to media outlets, kill switch instructions for digital evidence, even entries hinting at coordination with members of Congress and legacy intelligence assets. The judge called it the most brazen abuse of political power ever seen in a U.S. federal court. And while Hillary Clinton's legal team fought tooth and nail to dismiss evidence, stall proceedings, and shift blame, public opinion was no longer in her favor. Polls showed over 72% of Americans believed she should face prison time. A bipartisan coalition in Congress even introduced a bill aimed at stripping political foundations of their tax-exempt status. By the time the verdict came, the country was holding its breath. Guilty on 11 federal counts, including conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and operating a corrupt organization under RICO statutes. The sentence? 30 years, suspended to 15 with no possibility of parole, pending appeal. Hillary wouldn't serve all of it. Everyone knew that. But the symbolism alone was seismic. A former Secretary of State and nearly president, convicted of running a criminal empire under the guise of public service. As Clinton was led from the courtroom, stone-faced, shackled, and surrounded by marshals, Kash Patel addressed the press. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about politics. It was about restoring faith. No one is above the law. Not anymore. Aftermath. The Clinton Foundation dissolved within weeks. Several media executives quietly resigned after their financial ties were exposed. A new Senate hearing was launched into the role of intelligence agencies in suppressing previous investigations. And Kash Patel? He turned down book deals, documentaries, and even rumors of a presidential run. Instead, he launched the Liberty Project, an independent task force to investigate government corruption and restore constitutional accountability. His first statement to the American people: "You don't clean out the swamp in a day, but you start by pulling the biggest monster out first." And that's exactly what he did.